Welcome to Midnight Menu Plus One. I'm Ray Canada.
And I'm Margot Moss. Midnight Menu Plus One is a food lifestyle show on the podcast network. It's neworleans.com. Tonight, we're at the NOLA Brewing Tap Room in the Irish Channel.
The tap room is NOLA Brewing's on-site watering hole. They serve NOLA's regular lineup of craft beer as well as 8 specialty brews you can't get anywhere else.
The tap room is open 7 days a week, weekdays from 2 to 11 p.m. and weekends from 11 in the morning till 11:30 p.m.
Well, friends, glad you could join us. Each week on Midnight Menu Plus One, Margot and I invite a member of New Orleans restaurant and food community to have a beer with us, and we invite them to bring along their own guest, a plus one. We never know who the plus one's going to be. It can be a friend, a neighbor, a family member, fellow restaurant colleague. We just don't know.
Our special guest on Midnight Menu Plus One tonight is Joe Armitage of Sandwich.
All right. Well, we are really looking forward to chatting with Joe. But before we do that, let's briefly catch up on this week's culinary adventures. Margot, you seem a little jittery. Did you have some caffeine? I can tell.
Yes, I had a Thai iced tea.
Uh-oh.
I am very jittery. So.
All right. So now we've added a variable to this equation that's not usually present.
Yes.
We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'll have an excuse if I say anything embarrassing.
It was
I can
the
just blame
caffeine
it on
speaking.
that.
Yeah. Oh, wow, because you do not normally have much caffeine at all, right?
No, I'm not
No.
a big caffeine person.
Wow. I had, let's see, well, today, okay, so, my Monday's my day off, and only day of the week I get off, so I like to walk really far, and so today I walked 16 and a half miles round trip to the 9th Ward from my house uptown. And on the way back from the 9th Ward, I stopped at Elizabeth's, and I tried to do that last week, and they were closed. They're fixing the floor some, but I hadn't been to Elizabeth's in years. It's been a while, and everybody loves it so much. So I had a great meal. I got the redneck eggs, which is like a couple poached eggs, a hollandaise sauce over like 3 fried green tomatoes with hash browns. Really good.
Yum.
Love that place so much.
Sounds like enough and good fuel for your 8 miles back.
Yeah, that probably you burn like so few. You got to go 200 miles to burn a pound or something like that. So it's like basically that's probably one bite of fried green tomato. But I'm exhausted. So you're all caffeinated. I'm the opposite. I'm exhausted. But then also last time I was down that way in the Bywater a few days ago, I meant to go to Elizabeth's and I didn't get far enough. I stopped when I saw Cake Cafe and went to Cake Cafe, which also I haven't been to in a few years. Not a few years, a few months. And I got the salmon and eggs. It was so good. It was like, sometimes you get salmon and eggs and it'll be like just a little bit of like, this was a whole fillet. It had to be 4 or 5 ounces of salmon on top of the eggs. It was just so good. I love that place anyway.
Well,
Just
in
terrific.
the theme of that area, I went to Paladar 511.
Yeah, how was that?
I loved it.
I have not been.
Yeah, but I highly recommend it.
What'd you have?
Well, let's get to our guests. I'll tell you all about.
All right. It's a secret. She doesn't want us to know.
Yes, I want everyone to go and not be influenced by what I ate. So.
Oh, okay.
Let's meet Joe.
Welcome. So glad to have you here, Joe.
Thank you very much. I live in the Bywater, by the way, so yes,
all right.
there's a connection.
So I walked past your house probably a couple times this week.
Yeah, mine's probably the smallest one on the block, so a little inconspicuous. Stay out of people's way,
All right.
Stay low key.
So Joe, last time I saw you, it was at a wonderful little restaurant on Maple Street called Sandwich.
Rocking at the Sandwich.
We love
Absolutely.
Sandwich. Absolutely love Sandwich.
Chef Michael Brewer over there putting together, I think some pretty outrageous po' boys. His idea was to take what he saw on small plates around the city and slap them in between Leidenheimer po' boy bread. So from there on, it kind of took off from the Po' Boy Festival on Oak Street. And I think the sky's the limit for him. Maybe Maple Street wasn't his best location.
Right, so you're alluding to the news. The news we got this week was that Sandwich is going under.
It is.
That
Mike's probably moving
devastating.
on, and I bet that's what his idea is right now, is to get a more lunch-friendly location, because that seemed to be when the main time that he was dominating was during lunchtime. Once you get into the nighttime, you have a lot of bars to compete with in that area. So, I think he's got other plans. He's a big wine guy. And so Mike's going to do well for himself. He's the king of Louisiana seafood right now. So, how can you compete with that?
So what do you mean? Tell us a little bit about where he came from. I don't know.
He worked for years at Commander's Palace. He was a wine buyer over there. So, much like a lot of us in the industry, you just start out really, I think, just with a passion for people. And you get into it, whether you're waiting tables in the front of the house or you're cooking in the back of the house, or maybe you're doing both of the things. That's how a lot of people get inspired in the New Orleans restaurant business, is just by getting involved at the low level and working their way up. Much like the guest I brought today, and it's very intertwined with all of the things like music. A lot of the people who are involved in the restaurant industry are involved in the music industry.
Right, yeah, we get that all the time.
Absolutely,
yeah.
It's incredibly intertwined. I think people in New Orleans have a tendency to bounce back and forth between all of their passions.
This is what bums me about Sandwich going under, because the sandwich place opened up across the street from you, and it has none of those things. It's a cultural wasteland. It's just a national chain that serves mass-produced Frankenfood and has no interest in music or culture or art or whatever.
It's hard to believe those places can survive.
And that place is doing fine, and Sandwich goes under. It broke my heart. I really wanted to just give up on the city this week when I heard that. It was so horrible. Well, how do you explain that? I don't get it.
Well, I think
it's cheaper, obviously.
There's a lot of dynamics involved. Absolutely. You really have to have a pretty tight business plan and fit your niche, so to speak. And I think that Sandwich had a lot of those things, but there was a few things, probably just some other environmental factors. I definitely think there's a lot of bars on Maple Street, and so we leaned towards a lot of the craft beers, and of course NOLA and things like that people are doing around nowadays. We pulled, Mike being in the liquor industry, he had a lot of contacts, so we pulled from a lot of the different distributors that were coming in, and so he kind of focused a little bit on that, but his food would speak for itself. So I think that next time around he'll probably add maybe a wine dynamic to it, because he's really into wine. I think that's where he originally comes from, as far as his passions. So maybe next time around he'll fit the neighborhood a little bit, because hey, look, even in that location, there aren't too many wine shops around.
Right, right.
So, maybe he cultivates the idea, because he's generally an uptown guy.
Yeah.
Maybe he recultivates the idea with a little more basis in wine instead of beer. And
what percentage of your customers were students?
Not very many, as a matter of fact, because, of course, it all starts with your own sphere of influence. And then getting out to people, and they tell other people, and they tell other people. And then convenience is a major factor, of course, because if it's in your neighborhood, you're probably going to go to it. But quite frankly, with our price point and the kind of food we were doing, I would say 20% maybe student or less. So we were very fortunate like that. We had a very good dynamic.
So, Joe, I want to know a little bit about you. Where did you come from? Where did you start in the food industry?
I'm a lifelong, when I was 17, I started at Clancy's, down there on Annunciation, Henry Clay area. My dad lives in that area to this day. Yeah. And so I moved over to a place called Flagons, which was one of the first original wine bistros. There was a manager there named Daryl Reginelli. And so he went on to do some pretty big things. And throughout the years, I met some really great people. I was involved in music in the early 90s as well. That's how I met my plus one over here. As a matter of fact, my plus one had a restaurant in the French Quarter for many years.
All right. Maybe we should go ahead and bring him in then, too, now that you started to introduce him. Let's do that.
Surprise!
Wait. All right, I would like you to introduce your plus one, but I don't want to get away from.
Okay.
You're not going to get out of us
no problem.
Interrogating you.
We'll restart the story. My plus one is Aaron Lambert.
Welcome, Aaron.
Welcome, Aaron.
Hello.
Why'd you choose
Great to
Aaron?
be here.
Well, Aaron is a local musician. He's a lifelong New Orleanian. He grew up in the French Quarter. He's been one of my best friends. As long as I can remember now, it's got to be probably 30 years. And, we met at an early influential age, and he was very influential on me. His family was. They are centered around Preservation Hall and the local New Orleans music scene, as well as restaurant scene. His father owned the Royal Cafe for years, which was right across from the current Rouse's, or the old A&P food store. So Erin and I both worked there as managers in the late 90s and early 2000s up until its closure.
Were you co-managers, or were you
Yeah.
different shifts? Or
We pretty much we were always kind of either he was getting me a job or I was getting him a job as we worked through the restaurant industry.
It's first of all, I appreciate Joe bringing me. It's great to be here. I've known Joe for close to 30 years. We met at Le Bon Temps Roulette. I was looking for a bass player for this band, and I just turned around and asked him, "Do you play bass?" He said, "No, I don't, but I have a friend that does." Sat down with a pitcher of beer, and 30 years later, he's my best friend in the world.
What band? Wait, hold
Wait,
up.
you
what
guys
band?
are there when you were 12? What's going on? 30
No,
years
bro,
ago.
we're old. We're old, dog.
You do
We're
not
old.
look,
We're
yeah,
old.
like you've been legally
old
drinking 30 years
school,
ago.
and then
Dark in
there's
here.
preschool. This is preschool. No,
Okay.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
And what band was it?
The name of the band was Moon Saloon. It was named after a bar in Crested Butte, Colorado, and we had no fame, but we got to play at like the original Muddy Waters and Tipitina's, and the scene back then was just, it was the music. I am the luckiest man in the world. I just feel I'm the luckiest person to be born into the city I was born into the family I was, into the people and the city that I was, and music was always going to be a part of it. And Joe and Moon Saloon was really my first adventure with music outside of Preservation Hall, which I had grown up around in traditional jazz and brass band music. And we went out and did it and opened up for Widespread Panic in Auburn, Alabama, before Widespread was anything. And most musicians do have to have other ways to live, at least at some stage in your career when you're starting or whatever. Most people do augment it. And actually, growing up as a kid, the musicians I look up to, all the traditional jazz musicians, they were school teachers, mailmen, postmen. They all had day jobs and everything. So my heroes were just normal, everyday people. And so that's what Joe was, and that's what, one of the reasons we connected so well was we do both have a passion for food and the city. And when I started working at Royal Cafe, Joe was already working there and managing there, and I just came on for the last couple of years, right before we closed 2004, the fall of 2004. And since then, when we closed that down, I went and took a manager job at Cafe Giovanni. And I had Joe and an incredible staff of people that, needed a place to work. And actually, I think Tim Washington, a great, dear old friend, still works at Cafe Giovanni.
Absolutely.
One of the best Italian restaurant places in town if you
Still
get
love
it.
Chef
opera,
Duke
the live
Cicero.
opera during
Oh,
the.
yeah.
Where else can you go and hear live opera? And it's kind of performance art too, because they move around. They don't just stand in one spot.
It's really it's a great place to go for a little event thing if you've got friends in town or something like that. Great food as well.
Go there and let Chef Duke feed you. Get the feed me.
Yeah, get the feed me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what we got. We got the feed me when I went there last time.
It's a great deal. It's a great deal.
My waiter said to me they were having this quasi-romantic thing going with the singers as they moved around the room, and it was a little over the top. And the waiter came over and said, like, I always find this way more creepy than erotic. I said, you're getting a big tip. That's great.
By the way, I did want to go back and say the salmon and eggs and bagel plate.
Cake Cafe?
It's all my girlfriend Julie ever
And
gets.
if you want
Awesome.
another musical
It's awesome.
connection, the guy who owns Cake Cafe, Steve Himmelfarb,
Okay.
he was one of the big-time music producers and studio engineers in New Orleans in Metairie in the early 80s and whatnot.
Back when New Orleans area had a lot of studios.
We recorded with him with Moon Saloon.
Yeah.
So, people, there is a real strange connection between, I think there's an energy that you have to put into both, and it's a consistent energy.
Well, don't you think that the music scene here and the creativity of it inspires the food, and the food inspires the music? It's sort of like they kind of go
Absolutely.
together. It's not an accident that the place is so creative in both those things,
I think you have to, you kind of have to do both every day. My stepdad owned a restaurant, Randall's, in Metairie when I was a kid. That's how I got my start. And he always used to tell me, "Hey, life's a bitch, but eat a good meal every day. You'll be happy once every day." And music's the same way. You're going to pick up the drumsticks.
I get about 3 good meals a day in this town every day, and I'm miserable. I don't understand it. I'm missing something.
It's perspective. No, but that really is true if you're focusing and living in the moment. And I think that's what cooks and people who work in restaurants and people who do music, they do the best, is they live in the moment. When you're serving a guest, it's their little moment. It's their, they're on stage, and you're there to make them shine for a minute, and so it's all about people, even though it's your craft is music or food, it's still all about people. Talking about the Royal Cafe, we have so many friends out of that restaurant that are lifelong friends. One of them just went through open heart surgery, and it's a guy Aaron had to let go at one point, but came back strong.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
No.
This was 20 years ago.
He fired himself.
Yes.
I had to be the conduit for it.
It's amazing how, it's just the circle of friends build out of these restaurants and out of these bands, and it becomes the soul of New Orleans.
And I do want to say another one of those people that worked at Royal Cafe with us has been sitting in Saints. We have a group of about 15 of us that have had season tickets together for about 16 years. And Jennifer Freeberg, who sits with us, I've known this girl since we hired her at Royal Cafe when she was a 16-year-old hostess. And this girl now is the events coordinator and pretty much runs Cafe Giovanni with Chef Duke.
Wow.
And, yeah, she's got an amazing daughter as well. Hey, Cass.
Okay, let me ask you, Joe. So what do you think you're going to be doing next? What is if you're pursuing your passions, and where's that going to lead you next?
What's the next moment? You said you're living in the moment. What's the next moment for you?
I'm 43 years old now, so playing music.
Wait a
with
second.
my boys.
See, I was right. You were 13 in the bar that day.
Yeah.
30 years ago,
Pretty
you
much.
said.
Well, when you're from New Orleans, you usually start early.
Yeah.
That's why you can adapt to, you don't lose it too often. You start out so early. By the time you're 21, it's like, that's old hat.
You've already made all these memories, lifelong friendships. All these things have already happened by the time you're 14.
Well, I don't know. I feel very lucky. I don't know if it's South Louisiana or what it is, but you do build these lifelong friendships that stay there and stay there. A lot of times it's because of proximity. I mean, your people don't want to leave New Orleans, so you stay friends for a long, long time. So I'm right now I'm hanging with my family a lot because I feel like I have an opportunity to. And I'm hanging with my friends, and I think the next chapter has a little music involved. It certainly has some food and whatnot involved. I really enjoy being on a team, and that's a great thing about working in a restaurant is that you get to cultivate a great team, and that's really what makes a great restaurant. I mean, now food is obviously an important component, but as we know, convenience sometimes dominates. You'll go to that sandwich shop that's new and it's around your corner.
Not me, but some people will.
Exactly, But I think there's a happy medium between serving people and being able to exist in this. I mean, New Orleans has such great food, and right now with a lot of the types of restaurants that are out there, it's not cheap to go out to eat in New Orleans anymore.
Right.
So I think that a guy that can find the happy medium in between serving great food conveniently at a good price, that's where I'd like to be.
Huh.
All right,
so what are you going to do
musically?
musically? Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, not only am I fortunate to have Aaron Lambert in my life, but Dave Jordan, who's a great local musician too, is somebody that's a lifelong friend of mine. So I've already been collaborating with them behind the scenes for years, and I think it's just now time to bring it out of the shadows.
He's gone.
Do you
Yes,
play
he
with
plays.
them?
He's gone out on a couple tours. He's being a little shy right now. He's just
what
dabbling to get back into music.
Coach them emotionally, or do you
I've
actually
always-
play
I've
an
always-
instrument? Or?
Actually, it's
Yes,
funny.
both.
Coaching the emotionally part is a big part of it because people, if they're confident about what they're doing, if you just tell them that sounds good, then they'll just keep doing it, and then they'll get better at it.
So what instrument? We didn't hear it yet.
Guitar, sing, always used to do that, but I really I like writing songs, and that's why it's easier for me sometimes to just be on the couch and let everybody do the stuff out there. But
So your writing is something you're
absolutely
pursuing.
It's something that's always a part of your life every day, much like having to eat a meal, playing a song or sitting down, with your instrument or whatever, and just basically having that melody that's in your head come out into reality. is something that's real special. It sticks with you, and you're lucky when you have that. A lot of people do. They grow up with music. Everybody kind of gets, maybe their parents make them play a drum or a clarinet or something. So it's a very universal language. A lot of people understand it. Mike at the Sandwich, he's an electrical engineer by degree, but he played saxophone when he was a kid. So these things, they're all kind of intertwined. Sports, music, food. Louisiana's lucky. It's got such a rich heritage of all that.
All right. Well, Erin, I'd like to know a little bit about your family's history with Preservation Hall and.
My
growing
parents
up.
moved down to New Orleans from Philadelphia in 1965. It was right after my uncle, Alan Jaffe, and my aunt, Sandra Jaffe, had started Preservation Hall along with Larry Bornstein. Larry Bornstein was a New Orleans icon. He was pretty much known as the king of the French Quarter, and basically they opened up the hall so traditional jazz musicians would have a place to play music. My mother had been down here. I've got to tell this story. My mother had been down here twice before they decided to move down here. And this is back in early 1960. And they grew up in a Jewish neighborhood in Philadelphia. And back in the early 60s, wherever you grew up, you didn't move away from your family. You didn't move outside your city or your community. And my mom came down and visited New Orleans twice, one time taking pictures of a second line that my aunt had taken her to. And actually, I found some of these pictures a couple weeks ago in a box. They're amazing. But after seeing the city, she wanted to bring my dad down here. My dad came down here, and after 6 hours said, I don't want to go back to Philadelphia. And they had the balls to leave their family and come down to New Orleans and move into the French Quarter with my aunt and uncle into this environment that was musicians, artists, and cooks. Buster Holmes was the cook of the French Quarter back then. He had a Creole food joint right there on the corner of Dauphine and Orleans, Burgundy and Orleans, excuse me. And right now it's a nicely renovated, gentrified property. But back in the day, he had roasted garlic chicken on Tuesdays for 50 cents and red beans and rice every day that had the turkey necks and everything and the best crawfish bisque you could ever smell or taste. And we would meet there with musicians and teachers and everybody. And so I knew at a very early age that, number one, the food is awesome. I love how this food tastes. And number two, every time I'm eating this food, I'm around people that I like being around. And then at night, I'd go to the hall and I'd see, wow, these guys are picking up instruments and they're making those people dance. And I just happened to gravitate to drums at a very, very early stage. And, just sort of let the city raise me, which is, now 46 years later. There's not a prouder man walking the earth to say he's from where he's from.
So you got to have some great stories in Preservation Halls. Can you give one or two that kind of stick out? What are the first ones that jump to mind about musicians, something unusual happening at Preservation Hall?
The first one that jumps to mind, because it's the most recent, was being at the Foo Fighters situation that was going on there last spring.
Tell us about that.
I got a call from my I got a text from my brother Howard, who works at Preservation Hall. He's been managing there since he graduated from college. My cousin Ben is the guy with the hair that plays with the band, and he said, "Hey, the Foos, who I knew had been recording there all week, are going to have a little show if you want to come by." So I really wasn't planning on going by, but at 7:45, I got a text from a friend saying, "Hey, I'm going by the hall. Let's go." We go by. There's 8 people out on the block. Next thing I know, Howard says, "Hey, come here." He brings me inside, and there's production stuff everywhere, film stuff everywhere. He introduces me to a couple people, and then next thing I turn around, and my cousin Jeanette, who's married to my cousin Ben, introduces me to Dave Grohl, and we had really an amazing conversation about New Orleans, about the food, about Joe Lasty, the drummer of the hall. And Joe Lasty, who's probably, I'm not even going to guess, I don't want to do that to you, Joe, but Joe's been around for a little while longer than I have. I've known him since I was a child, and I know he, along with other traditional musicians, emotional struggle of giving your life to your passion and feeling, unrecognized by the greater awareness of the social community. And to see, to hear from Dave his respect for the city and the music and everything. It was
so he has pretty good knowledge of
dude.
pretty
It was
intimate
so.
knowledge
It
of
was
New
so.
Orleans musicians.
I was blown away. I've been fortunate enough to come across quite a few celebrities
Right.
and noteworthy people in my life, and I've got to say that more so than anybody I can think of off the top of my head, Dave Grohl really does get it.
Wow.
I sat before they did their set. The Preservation Hall band did a short set. And the drums, the hall, if you've ever been in Preservation Hall, it was
Who
set.
hasn't,
It
right?
was set up completely. You know who hasn't? A lot of locals. A lot of locals. I hate to say that, but yeah, a lot of locals. Anyway, it was set up completely opposite, and I saw Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins, the drummer for the Foo Fighters, sit there and watch Joe Lasty for 30 minutes in complete awe
Wow.
of what he was doing, in complete awe of an art form that I have been breathing and bleeding for 46 years, and to see the look of validation on Joe and all the musicians' face. I was lucky to get a chance to thank Dave afterwards. We talked for a little while longer, and just to let him know that, it was funny. I asked him, how long have you known about the Hall? And he was honest. He said, for about a year, like until they did
Wow.
something with My Morning Jacket, they weren't on his radar, and I just wanted him to know that I really appreciated the fact that them doing this with the Hall is going to give the voice to this music and this, and the Hall itself, which is and will always be so much more than just a building or a venue to me, to the world, was an incredible gift. And he's a cool dude, really, just a cool, great guy.
Got to give Ben Jaffe some credit too for
look,
having a lot of vision and wherewithal to, it's a difficult slope. It's a slippery slope. Preservation Hall is all about the tradition
Right.
and the history. And so how do you move that into the future?
Especially in the light after Katrina, when so many of our musicians were displaced
Right.
and weren't able to come back.
And disproportionately, the older kind of folks who
Exactly.
are the mainstay at Preservation Hall. It's the older guys
Exactly.
passing on traditions. When you go there to hear play on a typical night, the majority of them are, tends to be like African American guys over like 70 or whatever,
Yep.
like the good chunk of the musicians. And
That's how it always has been.
and those guys died disproportionately or got driven away and couldn't come back.
They did, and so like Joe's alluding to, I have so much love and admiration for my cousin. We all had to come back to this city and rebuild our lives in some form or fashion. I really don't know how to wrap my mind around having to also rebuild something it's not just a business, like, you open the doors every day. It's sort of an iconic place for an art form, for traditional New Orleans jazz.
Right.
And what he's done with the music and how he's gotten it out there now and what he's doing with it is just it's great to see.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of him.
It's that epicenter, that crazy, singularity of how how business and something great that's great for humanity works together in synchronicity.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, what do you think about this? Could there be a food version of that? Because sometimes a put down for some of the sort of iconic New Orleans restaurants that don't tend to
Sure.
develop. We'll call them food museums, and that's usually meant as an insult, sort of for certain ones. Like, if people, I'm going to such and such a place. I'm like, man, why would you go there? That's it's become a food museum.
You want to know
But
where I eat?
What's that?
I've been here 46 years. You want to know where I eat, brother?
Where?
When I want seafood, I go to the Galley on Metairie Road. I've been eating my seafood at the Galley on Metairie Road for 20-some years.
Does it stay the same?
It is always the best. They don't change their recipes. It's
Okay.
awesome. They've been doing the soft shell po' boy out of Jazz Fest since the first year in 1969. The best barbecue shrimp in the city. I've eaten
Pascal
them all.
Manales. No.
Not since the storm. I hate saying it. Mr. B's. And I would take
Mr.
Mr.
B's is
B's
great.
7 days a week and twice on Sundays. And
Fantastic,
Mr.
yeah.
B's throws it down.
Right.
If we're talking, what else? Garlic chicken, it used to be two jocks. I got to go back there.
I love the
Yeah.
people at Charlie's Steakhouse, and that
Oh, I
makes the
love that place.
steaks
My wife and I were
taste
just
delicious.
saying yesterday how bad we were jonesing for a steak at Charlie's Steakhouse. It's been a few months since we've been. We love that place.
And every time you go to Charlie's, you see people.
But what do you think it is about that? The thing is, you couldn't, as great as New Orleans food was, say, 50 years ago, you couldn't you couldn't, if everything stayed the same and you couldn't just subsist and enjoy just eating that all the time. In the same way, musically, like Preservation Hall is amazing, but you wouldn't want it to be the only place you go to hear music, right? I mean, it would be sort of, after a while, it would sort of be ingrown or whatever.
Absolutely.
So what is it about the interplay between tradition and growth? Like, how do those things, do you see a relationship between the two? And I mean, for example, you need to go back to the fundamentals. Football's flashing in the background. I'm thinking of it. You have to go back to the fundamentals to know how to create new plays or whatever. It's sort of like you have to go back to the fundamentals of jazz to be able to understand where it came from and to be able to move forward in new creative ways. And I think to preserve something that's really solid fundamentally and is really, really, really loves the tradition, I think is really important for also being creative. No, I mean.
Well,
or do you disagree? You're nodding kind of.
No. I agree with much of what you said, but I think, unfortunately, honestly, since Katrina, I think the game has really changed. The game has really changed in the food industry. I think a lot of the types of places, I should say, that used to be able to carve out a good niche aren't really going to be able to as more because, number one, you can't afford the real estate in the neighborhood that you used to be living in to have it. Now somebody's coming in, improving that thing, and they're putting in a nice sandwich shop like you mentioned. Look, I actually worked at the Sandwich, too, for a couple months. I helped out Mike Brewer and everything.
Nice.
And amazing product. But, yes, the cards are again, it's really difficult unless you're coming in with a huge bankroll or a huge name. And we've even seen a lot of huge names not be able to succeed since the storm because what people want on their menu now is different what they want before the storm because we've got about 38% of this city that are just now living in New Orleans. So they're still used to the food that they are familiar with. And so when a new place opens and it's a little more chic sounding, it appeals to the person more that just moved down here and is buying the $500,000, $800,000 home. But
and also, don't you think it takes a while to develop a taste in those traditional dishes too? It's like traditional jazz.
Absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
You can be a tourist and go and have your first jambalaya and go, "Wow, I've never had this before. This is awesome." But the one you're going to like the first time is going to be different than the one you're going to like 10 years after having it week in and week out. Right? You get to refine the subtleties of it come out over time. And music's that way too.
Absolutely.
And it takes it's not to slam the carpetbaggers or new people are coming here. It's just to say it takes a while. I know from my own experience. I've only been here 10 years, but my first couple of years, I'm embarrassed to some of my favorite restaurants in my first year or two here. I wouldn't want to tell you what they were, but
and some of the greatest ones, they're always coming and going too. So I think you're riding a wave because the market demands all sorts of types of products. And so. You're going to get the whole spectrum. We used to love this place called Uglasic's.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
They keep teasing us. They come to the festivals about once a year and they tell you they're about to reopen. And
they
then they
do
never
private functions.
Yeah, but they don't reopen the place. They keep promising they're going to reopen that place.
So, it's just like that. It's like you ride that wave of
God, you just made my mouth water.
I know, Uglasic's. A place that we've gone to quite a few times, Maurepas in the Bywater.
Right, yeah, just shut down this week too.
It's lots of different factors. I think that, maybe the new business plan is that you're only thinking about operating for 5 years and you're flashing in the pan and showing what you can do and moving on to another crate. I don't know. I think, like Aaron says, I think the business plan for a restaurant has changed, much like the business plan for a musician has changed. You don't sell records too much anymore. Everything's a personal appearance.
But don't y'all think that is always happening? I mean, the food industry, the food business is really hard.
Yes.
I mean, the most talented, passionate, brilliant people, it doesn't mean that everything's going to fall in place. I mean, this is not a new thing restaurants close, right?
It's not at all, but and this is just my opinion from someone that has been sort of around the industry. I do feel that before the storm there was just a different. You didn't have as many people trying to open new places, so the raw failure rate was less. Like if anything else, I'm just saying. We're a city now, I think, of like 312,000, and before the storm it was like 368. And of the 312 that are here, there's still how many? 108 that were displaced that never came back. So I think that it happens everywhere in every city. But for example, and this relates back to what you were speaking of, as a New Orleans musician, frequently on the road, you see a place, hey, we got gumbo. So, all right, you know not to try it, but somebody in the band always tries the gumbo. It's never good, but the restaurant's always making a killing in Little Rock, in Tuscaloosa.
Right.
In New Orleans, do you know how good your freaking gumbo's got to be if you want to stay in business? It's got to be otherworldly. And so... And that's the thing is,
unless you're within about a block of the Jackson Square, then you're okay because tourists, it's their first time.
And look, for Royal Cafe, which lasted in the French Quarter, God bless it, for 20 years. I mean, 78% of our clientele over those 21 years were tourists. Yeah. I mean, that's what you're going to get.
Well, I'm speaking of Jackson Square. I mean, Erin and I both worked for Chef Scott Boswell for 5 years or so over at Stanley.
Stanley's awesome.
Yeah, so
You're making funny faces though. What do you have stories?
Oh, come on, you got lots of stories.
I got so many stories, and I am going to do somebody a huge favor and keep my mouth shut.
No, come on, it's just us. Come on.
No, but you get to
I
see.
love everyone.
We have seen the dynamics inside lots of different restaurants,
but Stanley's another good example. Stella was their original one, and that one went under, and then Stanley's doing great.
Yeah, so I think obviously location. That is always a tried and true. Whether it's real estate, whether it's business, whether I mean.
And leadership. And leadership. Location.
He is dying. He's dying to tell us the story.
Well, look, I think one of the great things about New Orleans is that it encouraged entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Whether you're a musician, you're an independent contractor, a waiter, whatever. That's almost an independent contractor by nature, Right. So it encourages the entrepreneurial spirit. And so a lot of times people are so encouraged to follow their passions. A lot of times I can attest to this by seeing all the other people around you going after their stuff. So you want to go after yours too. So there's a lot of spirit of that in New Orleans. And so a lot of times I think people, they believe that they can operate on that alone. But it still takes finding okay, what does this neighborhood not have?
Right.
What are people here actually going to buy? Let me figure out what this, that's what a business is. Your passion and your skill may be food or wine or music or whatever, but finding the area where they need that commodity is what business is. So,
well, I mean, you're saying sobering things, and if there are people listening that are thinking about starting restaurants in New Orleans, we don't want to, or musicians, we don't want to discourage them. We want them to be, we want them to be realistic, but. Can I offer maybe a suggestion of something on the positive side too? I think New Orleans, I thought about this a lot. New Orleans allows failure more than other places do.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You can bomb here, and where I come from, you bomb and you're a loser. You want to here you bomb and it's you laugh it off and you go, okay, I'll try again because everybody's a loser here. We're all screw ups, and there's a lot less sort of demand for perfection and for success here. So you could be an entrepreneur, and if it doesn't work out, then you lick your wounds, you regroup, and you come up with something else a year later.
That's what true freedom is.
Yeah, I think that's a key to success too. Is learning, experiencing failure, and having the mindset to keep going. To me, that's a successful life.
Right.
And I'm glad.
I mean,
that
Margot
it's
and I have been
fostered here.
failures as broadcasting for 3 years now.
Look,
and,
I gotta say,
and people they still put a mic in front of our face. It's great, this town.
Failure is a tricky word to use, and it's one of the things I hate about the English language, because when a restaurant closes, to me, that doesn't mean you failed.
Right.
Royal Cafe closed after 20 years. That's not a failure.
Absolutely.
I've known great restaurants that were open for 6 months that to me were an absolute success.
Right.
To me, the sandwich was a success for Mike Brewer.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's going to
Yes.
give him something that he can build on. It's got a great springboard for people to move on. And to that
Thank
point,
you
New
for
Orleans is
pointing that
uber resilient. And that
Yes.
is one of the things that allows us to continue after the storm and after people moving away and these other things. And I in no way meant to discourage anyone.
No, I
will
just
I will
offering
say
that as a
this:
balance,
being a musician that grew up and lived here, and also lived in Nashville, Tennessee, and some other places for a couple of years, there is no city musically that will open their arms to you as a musician the way that this city is. If you come here and you just open yourself to this city, just be real, and it's awesome. And
Trying is a way of life here.
Exactly.
You just keep trying. That's what you do
Well,
with your
it
life.
seems like the city's more in tune with the process than is with the product at the end of the day, too, isn't it? I mean, like,
You gotta be.
I mean, I go hear a lot of music that's okay. I hear some music that's fantastic. I hear some music that's okay, and I love it and enjoy it because it's more about the earnestness and the whatever. And you're saying, where's that person going to? And that person's only 18. Where are they going to be in another 2 years? And that kind of thing. I think New Orleans, it's taught me that. I didn't have that before I got here. I don't think, to the extent I do.
How long have you been here?
10 years.
Okay.
But I'm saying, like, don't you think that's a quality that the city has? I mean, it teaches us how to appreciate the process and not just sort of the final product. It's not demanding tomorrow that you perfect something, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I'm the type of person that likes to be a little more rehearsed. I like a recipe. Maybe that's why I like restaurants so much, Whereas, the New Orleans musician, they've been cooking that meal so many times, so often, they can just jump in with another guy and make that recipe right on the spot. So that's where that evolution takes place, is that for a New Orleanian, they're every day making that on the spot, and it's through the consistency of doing that almost like through attrition that, all of a sudden you're just a group of guys in New Orleans, and then 30 years later you're the Radiators.
No, but that's perfect. 'Cause
Yada yada. You're 30 years later.
Take Trombone Shorty, for example.
Right.
I remember when that dude was born. I was living in the Treme. I mean, we know their family really well. And then fast forward to 29 years later, and now like Dave Grohl wants to hang out with him.
Yeah.
And you're seeing so many New Orleans musicians. I mean, Jonathan Baptiste on the Stephen Colbert show.
Yeah.
And there's so many young guys. And it
makes me think of Elvis Costello, that scene, which apparently is real, from Treme, where he's basically starstruck by Kermit Ruffins. And Kermit Ruffins is just kind of like, who's that? It's Elvis Costello. Who's that? Is that a journalist of the Times-Picayune? Like, doesn't know who the guy is.
Look,
and he's totally unimpressed. They're like, hey, at that attitude, you're never going to leave this town. And he's like, who'd want to? Yeah, I'm good with that.
But that's right now, because you talk about the Joe Latisse, they've been their whole life unrecognized, and that's really only been now. But it goes back to your point of how it's cyclical. How don't you believe that goes in waves? Because I think there's been plenty of times throughout history where musicians aren't recognized. Like, I guarantee you, weren't they like the last people that went down with the Titanic? They're like, oh no, y'all got to keep playing. We're all getting off this thing.
I wanted to touch again on what you just asked and relate it back to food. Although I could talk about music forever. But the thing that I always got as a kid around the food here is it seemed to me like the recipes always came from somebody's mother. When you went to a restaurant or when you went to a cookout, it always came to somebody. When there are new places, absolutely, their food could be awesome. And there's a lot of new places that I know and love. But it's just changed a little bit. I'm not saying it's different. And that is going to make this city, I mean, we're still just the greatest city in the world. The food is just... come down here, cook everything, eat everything, and then go back to your city and try to be happy. It's tough.
Yeah, well, that's the big warning, too, for our listeners, right? If you're not, we have a lot of folks that don't live here, that don't, aren't from New Orleans, haven't been here yet. Like, the curse of it is this place ruins you to the rest of the world. You can't, after being here a few times, you can't enjoy the food anywhere else. You can't enjoy the music anywhere else because the whole package is so great here. That's how it is. You can't go on vacation anymore.
Well, and even though New Orleans has gotten more expensive to live here after Katrina, I guess on the national average, I mean, for people coming from California and New York, when they spend that dollar down here at New Orleans prices, you get a lot of bang for your buck. So it's amazing that with that economic dynamic that we've been able to maintain all of the culture here consistently over hundreds of years. I mean, that's been happening for hundreds of years. Same
amazing.
deal.
It's a miracle.
Right.
We are out of time, aren't we, Margot?
That
came on so suddenly.
Yes. Can we? Do y'all want to discuss anything? Put out any plugs or
do you have any projects?
Contacts for to buy CDs or support anything y'all are doing before we go?
I would encourage everybody when you're visiting New Orleans, if you're in town on a Tuesday night, to come by DBA and see me playing with the Treme Brass Band. If you're in town on a Wednesday night,
unbelievable band and a fantastic venue.
Definitely by far the best music club down on Frenchman, and the band's still run by the founder, Benny Jones Sr. Wednesday nights we play at the Candlelight Lounge. If you see Big Chief Monk Boudreaux come out, you might see me behind the drums. I've got my own band, Funker Fried. And it's funny, before the storm, when I was working as a manager at my dad's place, there would frequently be a weekend when I would help somebody to their table or talk to them and ask them if they had a nice meal. They'd see me playing at a club DBA down on Frenchman, and then they'd see me playing with the brass band at Preservation Hall. And that's, my only plug is just come down and visit the city, especially if you haven't been here, because I guarantee it's something like you will wish you always have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just shout out to the Dave Jordan Band and the Neighborhood Improvement Association, because those are my boys, and I do a lot of work with them. And Rotary Downs is a great band that anybody, if they haven't seen, kind of the, I don't know, what do you call it nowadays? It's the underground New Orleans type of music. I don't know, whatever it is. But Rotary Downs is been one of the best bands in New Orleans for a decade. So you have to go see them if you come to town. Mike Duson, West Bank Mike, is a very talented guy. You see him around town for sure. And Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes, they're great. So just a few tidbits of people that are great to see around town.
Well, great.
All right, that's one of the few times I think we've ever had a guest give plugs for projects they're not directly involved in, right? Usually it's their own stuff. Yeah,
What it's
Stuff
about
behind
here.
the
We're all
scenes.
family, man.
Behind
We're
the
all
scenes.
family.
Amen.
We're all family.
Well, our special guest tonight on Midnight Menu Plus One was Joe Armitage, and his plus one was Aaron Lambert. You can find out more about all these projects and anything else we find out in the interim by going to our website, itsneworleans.com.
Thanks, Joe and Aaron, for joining us tonight. And I'd like to thank Petite Pet Care and the NOLA Brewing Tap Room for the awesome beer this evening.
Have we mentioned the NOLA Brewing Tap Room is open 7 days a week? You can come here anytime, or you can join us back here next week for another Midnight Menu Plus One.
And we look forward to seeing you next week. Till then, I'm Margot Moss.
And I'm Ray Canada. Good night.
Summer's almost over, but at Old Navy the styles are as hot as ever. Get to Old Navy now for 30% off all jeans, 40% off all dresses, and 50% off all tees. That's right, get 30, 40, and 50% off all your favorite styles for the whole family, plus up to 75% off clearance. Hurry in fast. These deals won't last. The sale ends soon at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid in-store 8/22 to 8/28 and online 8/22 to 8/24. Excludes in-store clearance, bubbles, active, licensed, and men's package tees.